Praise be Jesus and Mary. Today we will touch on some unbelievable happenings in Canada. Public schools are attempting to ban the word family, and Catholic administrators are being persecuted for upholding Catholic teaching in Catholic schools. We discuss how this stems from the errors of Russia. These errors are at every country's doorstep, and they will overwhelm us if we don't heed Our Lady of Fatima. Welcome back to Fatima Today. I'm David Rodriguez, joined by my co-host, Monique Kroecki. And today we're going to turn our attention to the worsening situation in Canada. Things certainly seem to be worse there than on this side of the border in the United States where I'm at. But Monique lives up in Canada. And so I'm going to ask you to lead off with some of the stories of what has been taking place there and how we see Our Lady's prophecies regarding the errors of Russia spreading all over the world, coming, more and more, being realized more and more.
Yes, well, definitely the errors of Russia are being spread in Canada. And it's sad because Canada was founded as a Catholic country, first by the French. And even when the English conquered New France, when they named the country of Canada, they actually named it the Dominion of Canada, which comes from Psalm 71, verse 8 of the Douay-Rheims Bible. And he shall rule from sea to sea, right? And from the river unto the ends of the earth. So the whole country was actually founded, on Christianity, Roman Catholicism first, and then even when the English came, they still were looking at the Bible for a quote to help name the country. But it's just gone downhill.
One thing on that note, Monique, too, is I
Sure.
think I certainly keep this in mind as I study history and look at things. It is my understanding that those who apostatize from our Lord are obviously going to face more serious, punishments and trials than those who don't apostatize. In other words, like if you're just a pagan and you never even knew about the faith. For example, St. Leonard of Port Maurice talks about the levels of hell that they go to. And the worst place is going to be for those baptized Catholics, for example, that had the faith and left it. Obviously, even worse would be if you were a bishop or if you were a pope. Even Dante in his Inferno will put popes that are in hell at the very, very bottom level and the worst, and someone like Judas. But I think of that because, the United States was, at least the original 13 colonies, were largely founded as Protestant entities, and definitely in opposition, in fact, to the Catholic faith, Maryland perhaps being the only exception. And of course, the lands that, Spain colonized, like Florida, Texas, California. But Canada did start out largely as a French colony, and therefore a Catholic country, certainly, the eastern part, Quebec. And so that too, I think, has an effect on how things play out over time, that we have to keep that in mind. The more graces you receive once you fall, the worse it becomes. And so I wonder if that isn't playing a role here as well with what might be happening in Canada right now.
Oh, you know what? That's very true. And it's actually scary. It's very scary for this country because it was such a Catholic country. And we had, the Jesuit priests, come into North America, but 5 of them were martyred in Canada and 3 of them in Orisville, New York, and they spread the faith. And so we had such a Catholic country. And then, basically in the 60s, the same time around Vatican II, everything started changing. We had, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the senior, the father of Justin Trudeau. He was the one that was responsible for striking down the abortion law. And so Canada has no abortion law whatsoever. So you can abort a baby right up into birth because there's nothing, and nobody will touch that issue. The opposition party, nothing, because as soon as they say, well, maybe it might be good, for the first trimester or something like that, oh my gosh, the media just kills them. So like for most of my life, I don't see any opposition member touch this because they know they'll be vilified. So right away, they always have to say, oh no, we're not going to touch that issue. We're not going to touch that issue, because that's the first thing that the media asks them as soon as there's an election. And in fact, in the federal government, in the Liberal Party, you have to be pro-choice in order to be in that party. No pro-life politicians are even allowed to be in the Liberal Party of Canada. So that's how serious it is here. And we're basically a culture of death. I mean, we have the MAID, the Medical Assistance in Dying program, and they want to extend that euthanasia program to children and the mentally ill. Like it's very serious. So we have all of these different woke policies that are going throughout the country, but especially in the schools. The schools are really being targeted.
Well, right before you get to that lead story, I'm just going to mention if someone is maybe a little confused by some of the things that Monique is saying, especially vis-a-vis the errors of Russia or communism for that matter, I would encourage you again to pick up one of our most popular crusaders, right? This is a crusader. Do you remember the issue, Monique? Is it 134, 133? 133.
133 for communism.
Right. And it just delineates in very short, brief articles that you can read very quickly and share with others how these errors of Russia are being manifested, how communism is something that is much more expansive than many of us think. So I think, again, if what Monique was sort of leading up there confuses any listener, please get that magazine. Call up the Fatima Center, get it. It's very important to understand that, right? And what I do think is interesting, just, you finished off by saying how all these woke policies are growing. I've been reading a number of different articles, different radio commentators, a lot of buzz right now that is claiming, and I'm wondering if this is like real or not, but is claiming that like the woke ideology is now in descendancy. That sort of we've gone through, at least in the United States, these years under President Biden and of course 8 years under Obama. And so it really just seemed like the wokeism was just growing up in like this great crescendo, even in the previous Trump administration. But now there seems to be a number of things happening in our country. But, from different reports I've heard in other parts of the world where maybe there's some pushback now and maybe the woke is kind of going down. But then I start hearing what you're telling me in Canada. I'm like, maybe that's all wrong. Maybe that's a red herring and just meant to distract us somewhere else. So what's going
It's
on
really
there in
hard to
Canada in
know.
the schools?
Yeah, it's hard to know because we had Justin Trudeau as our prime minister, and of course, he resigned, and now we have Mark Carney. I don't really see any changes in this country. It's pretty bad. It's getting so crazy. We can't even use the word family in our schools anymore. There's a story about the Waterloo District School Board. They had a training program in November of 2023 at the Waterloo Oxford School and in Baden, Ontario, I believe that is. And somebody leaked the presentation on that. It was leaked to Juno News, and I think LifeSite News picked it up. Basically, the presentation linked the word family to white supremacy. This is how bad it is.
It's
Uh,
crazy.
it's so crazy, but this is how they stretch everything. So they said that the term family is viewed as harmful by our racialized students. Family implies positions of male authority and hierarchy and a nuclear family structure that is not the same for everyone. And other slides refer to a book called Culturally Relevant Pedagogy by Laura May Lindo. In her book, she says that family is one of the key words and phrases used to promote the dominant culture. And then another slide lists characteristics of white supremacy culture, such as objectivity, perfectionism, and individualism. And then another slide argues that additional signs of white supremacy include asking for evidence to support claims of racism. So if you say, where's the evidence? That apparently is a sign of white supremacy. Okay.
It seems like here, what I hear is you're having these two almost different world views that are coming into conflict. I would say simply the natural one, the one created by God, and a completely diabolical one that wants to overturn everything. Because family is simply, a man and a woman getting married and having children is simply the very order of nature that has always existed from the beginning. And now you have those who want to obviously deny the creator, deny nature. And for those who, again, I mentioned that magazine a minute ago, but if you look at Karl Marx and you look at communists, that's been part of their play in their playbook from the beginning. But this is really just going against God completely. That, like, even objectivity. Like, if you look, I think, at the definition of truth, I'm going to slightly paraphrase here, but Thomas Aquinas says, intellectual truth is when you have a concept in your mind and it corresponds correctly to what is externally true, right? So the proper correlation between what is external and what is internal in your mind, that's truth, and there's an objectivity to it. I mean, it's crazy to say that objectivity is is white supremacy. Has nothing to do with that. I mean, every culture has understood that, whether they're white, black, native, Indian, Aborigine, it doesn't matter. Everyone understands objectivity. You need objectivity to exist in the world. Otherwise, you would just walk off a building and splat and die, right? Or, try to kill the pig that you're hunting through the jungles with a soft blade of grass instead of a hard spear. I mean, that's objectivity. Like, this is ridiculous how it's gotten so insane.
Well, I find that subjectivity and emotional response seems to trump everything else. You can't look at the facts anymore. You can't look at objective facts. It all is emotion. It's all how you feel. What is your truth? She's speaking her truth. He's speaking his truth, right? These are the buzzwords that are said all the time. There is no objective truth anymore. You hear this everywhere.
Well, and the key thing that I think there is that we all recognize that when we go to the level of like emotions and how I feel and how you feel, what that inevitably does is that completely divides and fractures us. Even I myself do not feel the same way about the same thing on a given day. Anyone who's been married, I mean, you've been married for many years. I've been married many years. It doesn't mean that we feel the same way about our spouses all the time. Or even if our spouse does the same thing on a given day, you might still feel differently. So feelings by their very nature
Change.
are going to be very changing and are never going to be uniform, and they're never going to be able to unify people. It's going to like completely isolate and fracture us, which is, of course, what is a complete, that's the devil. I mean, the devil brings in all this division and fracturing, and it's almost to the point you can't even communicate. Because now if you use a certain word that happens to feel like I'm offended, then you can't use that word and you have to change your entire vocabulary. I mean, real disintegration, real division. And of course, we see that Our Lady of Fatima was already warning us about these things, because those divisions lead to war, lead to persecutions, lead to all these disasters that our world is facing. And she, of course, is trying to bring us unity in the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith all over the world, right? That's the triumph for Immaculate Heart. She's trying to bring conversion so that everyone's united together. She's trying to bring peace, right? So all of these things that she promises, the conversion of Russia, and then many other peoples will follow, the peace in the world, a period of peace, right? The triumph of her heart, the flourishing of the faith, all these things she is trying to bring to unite the human family, as opposed to fracturing. And the devil's like running around feverishly, just trying to scatter it all, I see. And you see that so much there, unfortunately, in Canada and certainly in this Waterloo district, but it's affecting all the schools.
Yeah, I know. And it's really interesting because the Waterloo district used to be a lot more conservative. Like, it's outside of the GTA, the Greater Toronto area. That was the more liberal area. And now this liberalism is spreading out further and further to areas that used to be considered 20 years ago conservative. So you can see how, this ideology is spreading throughout the whole country.
Yeah, the
And the
part I don't
whole idea,
understand,
sorry.
I was because the part I mean, really, the part I really don't understand is if someone makes a statement that X, whatever it is, this word is white supremacy, and you're like genuinely confused. And so you go, really? I never thought that. Can you give me an example of this? Can you sort of, how is that racial supremacy or white supremacy or whatever? Then that in of itself, the mere fact that you asked that question, like, clarify this for me. Is itself supposed to be considered racial and supremacy? Because that I felt like, what? Additional signs of white supremacy, you said, include asking for evidence to support these claims.
Yeah.
So you can be genuinely confused and actually trying to help out or trying to, be a helpful person in this matter and still even be like on the wrong track. But you say, well, can you clarify that for me? And suddenly that's white supremacy. So
They want to shut
it's
down
like you're
debate.
shutting down all communication.
Yeah.
It's like you're shutting down all conversation. It's like all y'all just got to be automatons, you're little robots, and whoever is running the show is in charge. They just get to tell you, and you can't ask, you can't think for yourself, right? You can't even use words, which I think is interesting because, of course, God, and we go back to Jesus Christ being the Word of the Father, the Logos, the eternal Word of God. It's like they're shutting down even our ability to speak and communicate, which is a divine gift, right? That's why the animals don't speak. We are able to speak and communicate to one another because we're made in the image and likeness of God. So the devil's even coming like full on against that. I mean, how can anyone think this is reasonable?
Well, people don't think it's reasonable because once it got leaked out, people were kind of up in arms about this. And so then the school board actually said on June 6th that the statements were taken out of context. Okay.
Oh, well,
But,
that's convenient.
but what they said was that, and here's the buzzwords, right? It says, Excerpts shared were part of a larger professional development session designed to deepen understanding around language, systemic bias, and how we can work together to ensure all students and families feel seen, respected, and included. The session explored how different communities may experience public institutions differently. There you go, subjectivism, and how educators can be thoughtful and inclusive in their communication. These discussions are part of our ongoing commitment to human rights, equity, and learning. And I don't even understand this because the family is a building block of society. Every single culture has a family. This is not a white
Well, and it's
supremacy issue.
well, there's built-in hypocrisy because if you're saying that certain people don't feel bad when the word family is used, then you can also look at everybody who does have a family. And if there is a systematic effort to not use the word family, then they're going to feel offended. And they're going to say, like, why are you trashing on my own upbringing and the fact that I do have a mom and a dad, or that I have a family and that I have brothers and sisters? So the problem here is this is incredibly hypocritical because you're simply saying, when something so basic like family, or can you explain something to me and use reason, and you just shut that down, it cannot be but be hypocritical. And so it's not inclusive. It's, it's completely tyrannical. It's tyrannical and oppressive. And that's what they always do, right? They always completely use the opposite words. This is not inclusive whatsoever, because if you don't use the word family, then I would argue you are excluding everyone who has a family and who loves their family and who cares about their family, right? I mean,
Yep.
so it's incredibly, incredibly narrow-minded, hypocritical, and tyrannical and oppressive. But that shouldn't surprise us because that's the devil, that he just shrouds it all up with lies. And so I'm not saying these people are intentionally doing it, but they're basically acting as agents of the evil one in trying to bring about this crazy revolution of thought and word and mind control in our society.
That's right. And now that's a story that's coming from the public school board. I've got another story that's coming from the Catholic school board. And just to let Americans understand the school system in Ontario, we have publicly funded Catholic schools. This stems all the way back to 1774 when the Quebec Act was given. So Canada was started by the French Catholics, and then the English conquered New France in 1759, 1760. You got that Wolfe Montcalm battle. And so what happened was, instead of the English stamping out Catholicism and French language rights, basically how they tried to stamp out Catholicism in Ireland and things like that, because they were worried about a revolution brewing in the 13 colonies, they decided to appease the French Catholics in order to gain their loyalty so that they would be on the British side. So what they did is in this Quebec Act of 1774, they guaranteed them their French language rights and the right to practice their Catholic faith, right? So that's very important. They also let them continue with their French civil law, even though English criminal law was being used. So these were huge concessions. And I think even Benjamin Franklin was so angry about this, it probably made him want to continue with the revolution even more. So, and then of course, then you have 1776 happen,
Well, as you say, they were
shortly
also
after that.
angry because they were hoping that they could get the French Catholics on the Quebec side on the side of the revolution. They would all revolt against England and therefore be more successful. So he was angry
Yeah.
at it, not just from the purely like military political standpoint, but also on those, let's say, religious philosophical ideas. Yeah. Yeah.
True, but he also would not have wanted to grant them their rights to practice their religion. That's for sure.
Oh, right. You have to get rid of all the popery. I mean, not to get into U.S. history, but certainly Maryland was that one colony founded here that had sort of a
Right.
Catholic background. And they experienced a lot of severe persecution. And persecution as Catholics has had a long, long history in the United States. So
Yeah.
Canada, obviously, it's shaping out a little different. So then what's the school system like now? Or what you were telling us, it's a little
Oh,
different up there.
yeah.
There's not
So
that
so
strict
so be,
separation of
so
church and
because
state?
Yeah, exactly. So because of that, the British North America Act in 1867, which basically divided the province of Canada, which was Upper and Lower Canada, into Ontario, Quebec, and it included New Brunswick and Nova Scotia at the time. And so um, French and English were both guaranteed their language and religious rights. So, for instance, English Protestants could receive their education in Quebec. French Catholics could receive their education in Ontario, and they could use their same language and keep their religious rights as well. So that was entrenched right in to the foundation of Canada. So today, Ontario still has, for Catholics, the rights to publicly fund Catholic schools. And so your taxes, when you have your property taxes, you can actually choose. Do you want your taxes to go to the separate board, which is the Catholic board, or do you want your taxes to go to the public board? So that is something that is unique in Ontario, because we do have publicly funded Catholic education. Okay.
You know, that's, I
But
think, a really important point just to understand, because that
yes.
does seem quite different from what we in the United States experience. It does sound a little bit, it's not unique in the world. In Germany, it was like that also. So I lived in Germany when I was young.
Okay.
And because there was the big division between the Lutherans there and the Catholics, it got to the point where you were obligated to pay a certain tax, obviously, and a certain tax went to the school systems. But you would designate, in fact, in Germany, your tithe, there's actually a tithe that is also government
Wow.
controlled through taxes. But you can designate like which church body receives your tithe, and the school as
Wow.
well will provide both. So there are different systems in different countries. So then, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're saying that in Canada, your taxes will support the public school system, but you can designate them going towards either a Protestant public school or a Catholic public school, or perhaps even other ones, I imagine.
No, you only have two choices: the
Oh,
public board or the Catholic board. That's it.
okay.
Two choices. And the public board used to be Protestant, but it's secular now. So it's
It's
just,
woke now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's
Hey,
just
first
public
expected
or
is
Catholic.
communist. It's a communist board basically now, right?
Yeah, it is. And just before I move on to the story that I want to tell you, it this is not uniform across Canada. This is in Ontario. You have to remember that some of the provinces, they joined the Dominion of Canada earlier than other ones. So and each province regulates its own education system. So there are different rules in different provinces.
Okay.
This is a specific Ontario. And I would say New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and Quebec are under the same laws. I'm not completely sure about the other provinces, because they all joined at different times. And so, but in Ontario, we have a constitutionally protected right to have publicly funded Catholic schools. So that's the situation here. So in the Toronto Catholic District School Board, there is a trustee who is truly Catholic. And I would say that the rest of them, I couldn't call them Catholic anymore, yet they are trustees of the Catholic board. And so this trustee, Michael Delgrand, he said in 2019, well, he voted against adding family marital status, gender identity, and gender expression as protected categories in the Toronto Catholic District School Board's Code of Conduct. Okay, but this contradicts Catholic teaching, and he pointed that out. So he was vilified for that. So that's the
So
first
just to
incident.
understand, he's basically just saying this is a Catholic school, and so we're going to be Catholic, and we're going to
Right.
uphold Catholic teaching and do things
That's
in a
right.
Catholic way, which, by the way, as you've just pointed out, is guaranteed by the state constitution as well. So should
Yes.
all be fine and clear, no problem here. And I guess if you don't like that, you can go to the public board, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
That
That's why we
didn't
have
happen.
the two boards. That's why we have the two boards, because one is Catholic and one is not. And so that was the first incident. And then the second incident was, there was a school board meeting, and there was a student trustee who was speaking, and she was really advocating for abortion rights. And so after the meeting, this same trustee went and spoke to her, and he said, abortion is actually against, Catholic teaching. He was trying to explain to her, and he wasn't yelling at her. He was calmly talking to her, but she got very emotional, very upset. And it could have been also because during the meeting, the priest who was in attendance also called her out and said, this is against Catholic teaching. So another teacher who witnessed this filed a complaint against this trustee with the Ontario College of Teachers, and actually wanted his teaching license to be removed. And which is incredible. I mean, first of all, he doesn't teach. He's not a teacher in the school. He was not this student trustee's teacher. The meeting was in a school board setting. It wasn't even in a school. And this trustee doesn't even teach, but he earned that teacher certificate, right? But they want to strip him of that. It's because they want to punish him,
Right.
for trying to uphold Catholic teaching. And
And so
this
once
is the
again,
problem.
just to understand it very clearly, basically we're saying the Catholic Church is teaching that abortion is wrong. And so that's the position of a Catholic school. And yet you want to change that. It's like you're bucking against the Catholicism and the doctrine. And you don't want to go to the public place, the public school. You want to stay in the Catholic school. But now you're going to come and attack and try to change the Catholic school so that it's not Catholic. And if you try to defend the Catholic position, they come after you. This is what's happening, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. And honestly, David, like the process is the punishment because the board had hearings to see if he went against the code of conduct. This started in 2019. He was finally exonerated in July of 2020, but then under pressure from different groups, as well as the mayor of Toronto, the ex-premier, which is like the governor, the ex-premier of Ontario, as well as the minister of education, they all put pressure on the board. So they tried him and saying that he went against the code of conduct, and he lost this time because one of the other trustees who voted in favor of him the first time switched her vote and voted against him this time.
Now you see what I think this really shows, and it's very reflective, I think, of precisely Our Lady of Fatima's warning that we must hold on to the deposit of faith. Because I think what I see as an undercurrent here is simply that, this wouldn't have happened 50 years ago or maybe 100 years ago because Catholics were united in understanding what Catholic teachings and Catholic principles were. And so I imagine in such a case, like all the trustees on this board would have been saying, well, no, there would have been an issue. I mean, and the student, as you mentioned, no one would have really brought up an issue because the Catholic identity was very clear, rooted in the one constant doctrine of the church established by Jesus Christ our Lord that doesn't change. But we've seen such a grave crisis and a dire situation evolve within the church, which stems, I would argue, even, it's in the hierarchy. Our Lady spoke against a apostasy. We know that the third secret, for example, talks about the apostasy that begins at the top. So we have a huge crisis in the hierarchy where they're not teaching the Catholic faith correctly anymore, many of them. And then that means it's going to trickle down into everybody. And so then just families, moms and dads are going to see it. Public school boards are going to see it. Catholics, no matter where you are, whether you're in business and teaching and medicine, you're no longer going to have, that's like you were saying, Maid earlier. I mean, you're no longer going to have these Catholic principles because we're losing the faith, as Our Lady warned. And then, of course, we know the whole communist infiltration, the Freemasonic infiltration that you've been talking about, like with Father Murr and others. It's attacking us. And so this is just a very striking close to the heart, I think, because it's our schools and it's our children, or it's our livelihood. In the case of Michael,
Delgrand.
Michael Delgrand, like it's striking our livelihood, but it's a really deep problem. Let me ask you another question. For example, in all of this, I would think because it's Catholic and he's the whole holding a Catholic position, priests, bishops, especially bishops, would have stepped up and been like, "Wait a second, this is the Catholic teaching. Like, why are you trying to alter Catholic?" What kind of response have the bishops had to this whole controversy?
Crickets. There has been no bishop
My point
who
exactly.
has gone to bat for this trustee whatsoever. Not one of them has gone to bat for him, and which is just absolutely terrible. He's all alone. He's all alone. His church isn't supporting him. His school board is against him. They've taken him to court, and then he appealed. He appealed the decisions. He went through the lower court. He appealed to the Supreme Court of, the appeal court of Ontario, and then he took it to the Supreme Court of Canada. So he lost at all the lower courts, and then when he on May 15th. The Supreme Court of Canada said they refused to hear the case. They gave absolutely no reasons. It was a very short statement. We refused to hear the case. No reasons given. And he has to pay the court costs that a lower court had awarded for like the school board won.
Right.
And so he had to pay the court costs,
like you're saying,
$200,000.
It's like you're saying, it's persecution and it's vilifying, and then they're trying to, I'm sure, set an example because they don't want others to raise their voice, right? So they use intimidation. And I think, I know we're talking about Canada right now, but I don't think anyone should think that this isn't coming near us. It doesn't matter. I think if you live in the United States or Australia or the UK or other places, maybe one day we'll get someone from the UK over here and tell us what's going on there, because I think it's really bad there too. But even in the United States, we have a lot of similar stories of things taking place in our school boards, things taking place in our public libraries. Just the infiltration of this woke ideology, and they're really running roughshod over Catholics. And we Catholics are not standing up for our faith. In many cases, we don't know the faith. In many cases, we're duped by the mass media and the propaganda that's out there. So I think it's incumbent on us to really work hard, band together. I think one of the clear solutions is to work hard at the local level, because that's where a lot of this infiltration takes place, right? It's at the local level. But if you can
Yes.
get involved, like on a local school board or the board of the public libraries that make decisions, because I'm mentioning that right now because we're in the month of June, and I often love taking my kids to the library. But June, we like sort of say we're not going to the library because they have so many crazy displays of unnatural vice that I just don't want my 6-year-old seeing this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those are all important. And even what you mentioned right now, it sounds like the way this all got started, because the Supreme Court got involved there in Canada, but it all started at the lower level. The accusations
Yes.
come at the lower level, and then they start going up. And so if you can have greater control over that lower level, which you can't influence, right? Sometimes we think, well, this is a federal decision, this is so far above me, or even like this is the bishop so far above me. But we can affect our parishioners, we can hopefully influence our parish priests. That's a little harder, but we can maybe get on our school boards and things. And I think if we fight these things at the local level and try to uphold the rights of Christ the King, the Sacred Heart, the Immaculate Heart, promote our Catholic faith as we should, then we can at least make some inroads or some effective resistance to the great evils that seem to be overwhelming us. But Our Lady, of course, did warn us about that great apostasy. Yeah.
She did, and the problem, David, is that what's been going on in the government has been what has correlated. Sorry, I can't speak. Correlated to what's going on in the church and in the Catholic schools from the hierarchy of the church. So, for instance, I went to school after Vatican II, and I wasn't taught Catholic catechism. I wasn't taught my faith, even though I supposedly was going to a Catholic school. All I learned was that Jesus
Yeah.
was a good man, loved the little children, and loved the poor. I was never taught a proper catechism. So, when you're saying people have to get involved at the local level, people have to fight back. You know, Friends of mine are starting to have grandchildren now, and my friends don't know their faith, okay, or the people that I went to school with, and neither do their children, and neither do their grandchildren. So who's going to fight back? They don't even know that they need to fight back because they don't even know their faith anymore. This is how bad it is.
Yep. No, you're right. And that's why it becomes even more important for apostolates like this one and for us to spread the truth, to spread the Catholic faith, to spread the message of Fatima, continue to encourage everyone to learn their faith, study their faith, live the message of Fatima, share it with others, because you are right. We are, it's a huge uphill battle, but God's still there and God's still in charge, and Our Lady is still going to bestow her graces. So if we can remain as faithful as we possibly can, we'll begin to influence things bit by bit, and help save our own souls and the souls of those around us. Right? I think Sister Lucy even said that. Do not wait for the answer to come and the call to prayer and penance to come from the bishops or the hierarchy, because God's already tried that and they're not doing it. It's now incumbent on us as well to save our souls and help all those around us that God has placed within, you could say, our sphere of influence.
You're right. Absolutely, David. It starts with a small group of people, but it can spread. I mean, the Catholic faith started with 12 apostles, but ultimately it is a spiritual battle, and it's Our Lady that is promised the triumph, right? Her Immaculate Heart will triumph. So we have to do our part. It's a spiritual battle. We have to obey the messages of Our Lady of Fatima. We can fight at the individual level, which I think is very important, but ultimately we have to obey the messages of Our Lady of Fatima.
Sure. Just to remind everyone, to that end, we're also putting out a lot of resources in the hopes that it will help you. We have that pamphlet that we haven't talked about enough, the 10 Joys of Being Catholic. That's a good thing for you to review and to spread to others. We've got the little pamphlet on the rosary, and we're putting up different rosary miracles up on the website, so you can listen to some of those. But a lot of resources that we're putting out. Devotion Our Lady of Sorrows is so important. We're putting that out as well in preparation for her feast in September. So I encourage you to come to the Fatima Center's website, fatima.org, check out all these different resources that are being posted, as well as just these talks and the talks by our priests. And there's a wealth of information at the website where one can really learn the faith better and learn the message of Fatima. So do share that with others, please. I know there was more, Monique, I think that you wanted to talk about a more
I
overt,
did. I did. I wanted to
insidious
talk about
communist
communism.
infiltration, how it's infiltrating Canada, the politics, the economics, the drugs, the security. I mean, all kinds of things that are happening there. So let's put that on for part 2 of the communist invasion of Canada. I guess here we dealt more with the schools and sort of almost a more domestic level. We'll hit the international geopolitical, drugs, all that. I guess that now another show.
I think Americans will be interested in this because what's happening in Canada is affecting the United States as well. So we'll
Well,
talk
I
about
think
that.
what a lot of people don't realize that there is very much a era of Russia/communist connection to all of that. So we may be aware of the problems, but not some of the roots.
True.
All right, that wraps up our show for today. We do encourage you and remind you to please subscribe to the channel. Please like it and share it with others, because that's just one way to help promote the apostolate. And then we will see you again next week.
And remember, Our Lady of Fatima has given us the only solution for the problems of our times. God bless you, everyone.
Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us.